darkness, the building collapsing, especially once or twice, and you don't look the same. You got to know who your enemy is. The enemy. You got to know who your enemy is. The enemy.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Lund Loop Daily Update for Monday. Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. Look at me just fidgeting here in my chair. This market never ceases to amaze me. I've seen a lot of markets over a lot of years, but this market in the last 2 years just seems to have a new outlier move every couple weeks, a new once-in-a-lifetime move every couple weeks. If you, let's just assume that you lived under a rock and you don't know what's going on. Well, let's do a little review here. So, yesterday, Sunday evening, we get this opening gap up on news that once again, wasn't there peace in Iran on Thursday of last week? Well, there's double, triple peace, I guess. And the futures loved it. They just ramped all night long. And then when we got to the open today, big gap up that, couldn't even close below the 9 EMA until like right here. Then it flattened out towards the end of the day, but a big, big up day across the board. You can see everything except for the IWM closed way above Friday's high. And as we look back at what's transpired the last couple of weeks, I think it's really important to understand this concept. It's something that I try to live my life by. I say try because, I'm a human being and fallible. Balance and focus, right? Balance is you don't get too out of whack, right? When things are going awesome, you don't get too high on yourself. When things are going kind of crappy, you don't get too low on yourself. You understand that life is like a sine wave. It's going to go like this most of the time, and you're going to just ride those waves. And that's where the focus comes. As you're having the ups and downs, you're focusing on where you're going, where your goal is, so you don't get knocked off course. And, last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. So we had this one day here. We'd been going like this to the moon. And all during this phase, we had naysayers that were like, this is unsustainable. We can't keep going up. We had people that sold here. They didn't get back in here. Maybe they bought a little bit here, but then they sold here. They just could not hang with this trend. And for most of this trend, we were just in there saying, yep. So far, there's nothing wrong. I mean, people know that I say this all the time. They hate when I say it. There's nothing technically wrong with this market. I said it through most of this run here. Then we got to this day here. And what I thought was interesting about this is the market was only down 0.75%, but a lot of names were down quite a bit. And that's when I put out this post right here. And it's right here. No, wrong one. What the hell is it? I had it all set up. Is it time to write yourself a big fat check? All right, that was on this day right here. And I explained that I closed a lot of straggler positions out. I raised a lot of cash. I actually wrote myself a check, took money out of the market to pay myself for what an amazing run this would be. And I said there were some things about it that were specific to me, but that also I just didn't like the action here. The next day, what happened? We had a rebound, and normally when we have these rebounds, everything comes back. But most of the names that sold off on this day did not come back on this day. And I said, that's kind of a warning sign. We really thinned out the watch list. And then what happened? We had this big day that dropped out of nowhere. Now, guess what? Guess what we didn't do on that day? We didn't panic. We didn't freak out. We didn't say, that's it. Now we're going to crash. All we did is paid attention to the technicals, right? Everything cleared off the watch list. And I said, I think we need a week to settle out, right? no panicking, not freaking out, still focusing, but understanding that we're maybe on the down, we're on one of the down sine waves. And I said, there's 4 things coming up this week. There's CPI or PPI, I couldn't remember which one, but there was big data coming out. There was Oracle coming out. There was possibly some conclusion or clarity on the Iranian war. And most importantly, on Friday, there was SpaceX. Now, this is another thing that I've been saying about, where you look at focus and balance. Everyone's been saying SpaceX, that's going to be the top of the market. That's the top. You can't have an IPO like this without it being the top of the market. And I posted something on Twitter last week that said, what if SpaceX isn't the top of the market? What if that IPO isn't? And people hated on that tweet. They hated. And that was like a sign. So we have the big drop, right? And we're already out. We're already heavily in cash. We're just kind of sitting there. We're in a great spot. And we're like, hey, let's not panic. Let's just give this market a week to settle out. Well, what happened? We had a little consolidation here. We sold off hard here, but buyers stepped in, which was actually a pretty good sign. But the next day it just gave way. We got all the way down to the 50, but the 50 held twice. We talked about the best case scenario would be a gap down reversal here, and that we'd have to maybe pick up some names intraday that we could then decide based on how this candle finished, whether we would hold or sell. We didn't really get that gap down reversal, but we did get that intraday turn here. We had a day that pushed back up. We stopped going down. And here's what's really interesting. On this day here, our watch list went from 0, like literally nothing on it. I think there was 1. I think BB was on there for 1 day. All of a sudden, a bunch of names came back onto the watch list. Now, it wasn't like go, 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 let's hit the throttle. We know we're going back to all-time highs, but it was like, okay, some of our criteria's come. We stopped going down. We recaptured levels. We've recaptured moving averages. Then we had Friday. And on Friday, I said, here's the thing. We're at the spot where if we're going to do a dead cat bounce, that would be the spot to fail. But it's also the spot where we could just rocket back to highs. I was a little bit on the fence, but I said, if I'm looking at the technicals, if I'm looking at the names that are on our list and the fact that they've not only stayed on the list after that big ad day, but we had more names come on. We went from 0 names one day to I think we had 10 the next and then 17 the next. I said, gun to my head, I think we go higher towards all-time highs. And I said, the way our watch lists are moving, right? And there's this really interesting quirk with our watch list. If nothing's on the list and then all of a sudden a bunch of things come on the list and they stay there for 1, 2, 3 extra days without getting knocked on or off, that usually means a massive move is coming. Doesn't always mean it's going to be up. It could be down. But I said, I think we have a big move coming, and I'm pretty sure, about 51, 60% sure it's up. Then what did we do? Right? We've looked at the market action. We looked at the individual names on our watch list, and then we looked at the final piece of the puzzle, and that is all the ETFs and sector indicators. And all of those were basically screaming, the bottom was in, we've got a better, than 50-50 chance of going up. And all 17 names that were on the list on Friday, every single one is green, and some are massively green today. Now, where do we go from here? I don't know. Because, again, it's the balance thing. Today's a big up day, and there's a lot of people that are like, woo, all right, yeah, we're going back to all-time highs. But there's some warning signs there, right? There's a couple of discrepancies in the movement today that make me wonder a little bit. And we're going to go through that in a minute. But the point is, if you've got a process, if you've got structure, if you're using something that is objective like technical analysis, you don't have to get too far over your skis. When things are dropping, you don't panic. You just go, okay, this is what we have now. Let's just step back. Let's wait to see if our criteria sets up. When things are going to the moon, you don't freak out and say, we're going to drop any day. You just try to stay as focused as you can on your process and your procedures. Remember, when I'm saying this to you, what I'm really doing is I'm saying it to me because I'm human and I make mistakes all the time, right? I didn't trade everything in this process perfectly, but this is what we're striving for, right? If we strive for our best self in the markets, even if we only hit 75, 80, 85% of it, that's going to be more than enough to make you money. So, all right, let's go through everything and check out some of these amazing moves in this market. So as you can see here, we went from